Silas is a ghost. Formerly the Fusilier, a master of systemic collapse for the shadowy Carthage Group, he built a new life of quiet craftsmanship, believing his violent past was buried. He was wrong. When his wife takes on a corrupt developer, Silas is forced to use his old skills to protect their home. His one perfect, hidden move doesn't just save the day, it sends a flare into the night, alerting the monsters he betrayed. But he soon discovers the fight was never his to start. He's been a pawn in a decade-old grudge, manipulated by a master he never saw coming. To save the life he loves, Silas must outmaneuver not just his old syndicate, but the true architects of power, a secret consortium that views the world as a ledger to be balanced. They don't deal in violence. They deal in permanence. And they have a job offer for him. He built a life from the ashes. They own the land it's built on. The Steward, an exclusive novella, only on Novella Station. The calculus of chaos. What's the true cost of a quiet life? For Silas, it's the moment he must use the monster's skills to protect the saint. The Joiner begins now, only on Novella Station. Chapter 1. The Dovetail Joint. The morning sun sliced through the garage window, illuminating a universe of floating dust motes and the clean, sharp scent of pine. Silas's world, in this moment, was reduced to a 12-inch span of cherry wood and the whispering focus of his own breathing. His hand, broad and crisscrossed with pale scars that told no stories to his neighbors, guided the chisel with infinitesimal pressure. A perfect, male half of a dovetail joint emerged from the wood, its angles sharp enough to cut light. It was an act of faith, this joinery. You cut the pieces apart so that they could come together forever, stronger than the original whole. It was a logic Silas could worship. From the house, the sound of mug being set too firmly on the countertop. A minor discord in the domestic symphony. Lena was home from her early meeting. He found her at the kitchen island, her shoulders a tight line under her soft cardigan. Spread before her were not the blueprints for the community garden she was championing, but legal documents. Her fingers, usually tracing plans for connection, were pressed to her temples. "The Beckett appeal," she said, not looking up. Her voice was the calm, measured tone she used in mediation, but Silas heard the fracture beneath it. Marlowe Properties filed a motion to dismiss. Again, on grounds we already contested. It's not even clever, Silas. It's just a brick wall. Expensive, time-consuming, designed to grind us down until there's nothing left. Marlowe Properties. The name was a bland, forgettable shell. Silas had seen the architectural renderings they'd slickly presented to the city council. The Beckett Senior Residences, a euphemism for luxury condos that would displace 24 long-term tenants, including old Joseph from down the lane. Joseph, who had taught Silas how to feel the heartwood of a walnut board, who had shared his workshop and his quiet, unhurried wisdom for 3 years after they'd moved in. Joseph called. Lena continued, finally looking at him. Her eyes, usually the color of a settled sea, were storm-touched. He got the relocation assistance packet. It's a list of apartments in the next county, miles from his doctor, the library, his life. He sounded diminished. A cold, familiar sensation began to uncoil in Silas's gut. It was not anger. It was older, more clinical. It was the recognition of a system. He saw it with a painful clarity. The predatory purchase, the legal bottlenecks, the offer of assistance that was functionally exile. It was a small, dirty engine of profit, fueled by the deliberate infliction of despair. He'd seen this model before, on grander, more brutal scales. The lawyer? Silas asked, his own voice disturbingly neutral. Outgunned. Marlowe's counsel is from Tiernan and Locke. She said the name like a curse. A white shoe firm known for its surgical, immoral efficiency. Tiernan and Locke. The cold coil tightened. He knew their type. Not thugs, but tacticians. They weren't the muscle. They were the nervous system of the beast. They didn't break doors. They rewrote the deed to the house. There has to be a pressure point, Lena said, almost to herself, echoing the very language of his past. A landlord, a silent partner, something we can expose. Silas walked to the sink, poured a glass of water he didn't want. He watched a sparrow land on the feeder he'd built, a simple, elegant box of cedar. A sanctuary. That's all Joseph wanted. That's all Lena was fighting for. Sanctuary. Let me look, he heard himself say. The words felt alien, like pulling a tool from a chest long ago welded shut. Lena's gaze sharpened on him. Look how, Silas, these are corporate labyrinths. They're designed to be opaque. He met her eyes, letting her see a fragment of the man he never showed her. Not the violent man, but the analytical one. The assessor. I have a way of seeing patterns. In structures. Bureaucratic ones. He saw the questions bloom in her eyes, the concern. He had always been just Silas to her. The quiet carpenter, the man who fixed things with his hands, who listened more than he spoke. He presented his past as vague, consulting, stressful, and ethically murky, now gratefully behind him. It was a fiction, but a protective one. Please, she said softly, the fight bleeding into a plea. For Joseph. That night, after Lena had fallen into a fitful sleep, Silas descended not into a basement of weapons, but into a digital ghost town. From a locked compartment in his workshop, he retrieved a slender, encrypted laptop, a device as dormant as himself. Its boot up was silent. He bypassed firewalls not with force, but with forgotten passwords and algorithmic skeletons keys, the digital equivalent of feeling for a lock's tumblers. He began not with brute force hacking, but with the benign, public-facing world, property records, LLC filings, municipal permit applications. He saw Marlowe not as a villain, but as a diagram. Lines of ownership led to a holding company, which fed into another. It was a matryoshka doll of anonymity. But every system has a flaw. A signature. Here, it was in the rhythm of the permits, the specific, overpriced contractors consistently used, the oddly accelerated approval timelines from a particular city official. It was a pattern of frictionless, greased progress. He followed the grease. It led, for shell companies deep, to an entity called Midas Holdings. The name was grandiose, foolish, a clue in itself. Midas's portfolio was a diverse, sanitized spread of real estate, waste management, and private equity. Too clean. The kind of clean that costs a fortune to maintain. A deeper, darker layer of his old skill set awakened. He used a series of proxies and blind relays to access arenas where information was a currency traded in shadows. Here, the whispers were different. Midas had a reputation, not for volatility, but for a cold, surgical certainty in its acquisitions. Competitors didn't just fail. They often found themselves tangled in unforeseen legal or regulatory snares, collapsing from within. The style was hauntingly familiar. One final, encrypted query. A cross-reference of Midas's executive codes, its operational fingerprints, against the private registry of a concern he knew better than any. The screen returned a single, stark line of confirmation. Midas Holdings, primary beneficiary and operational guidance, the Carthage Group. The air left the workshop. The silent hum of the laptop was the only sound. The sparrow outside was gone. Carthage. The word was a tune in his memory. He hadn't just worked for them. He had been a principal in their most elegant, most destructive arts. And here they were, the hidden puppeteers of the entity, trying to erase an old man's sanctuary. It was a sick, cosmic joke. The cold coil in his gut was now a frozen lodestone, pulling him toward an abyss. This wasn't a random injustice. It was a spiderweb, and he had just brushed a single, silken strand connected to the center of the monster he'd forsaken. He looked at his hands, still smelling of cherrywood. He thought of the dovetail joint, half cut on the bench upstairs, a promise of strength through connection. He had made a choice, years ago, to cut himself away. Now, to protect the joinery of this fragile, beloved life, he would have to make a single, perfect incision into the heart of the past. One phone call, one piece of strategically leaked data, a small, contained avalanche to divert the larger one. He closed the laptop. In the dark workshop, Silas, the carpenter, the husband, the guardian, disappeared for a moment. In his chair sat the ghost of the Fusilier, calculating the pressure point of a god. Some truths are weapons. Silas must confess a fragment of his to the woman he loves, turning her into an unwitting player in a game she can't see. Dive into the deception. Only on Novella Station. Chapter 2. The Ghost and the Machine. The ghost did not make the call that night. The ghost sat in the dark, calculating vectors of collateral damage. A Fusilier's first question was never, "Can I do it?" but "What cascades?" Sunrise found him back at the cherrywood, finishing the female side of the joint. The physical act was a grounding rod for his racing mind. Each tap of the mallet was a variable accounted for. Lena's safety. Joseph's home. Carthage's retaliation threshold. "You were up late." Lena's voice came from the doorway. She held 2 mugs of coffee. She was dressed for battle in a cream-colored blouse and a necklace of polished river stones he'd made her. "The wood was talking to me," he said, accepting the mug. It was their old joke from when they'd met. It had been at a farmer's market 7 years ago. He was there selling cutting boards, simple but flawless things. She was arguing passionately, but with a startling civility, with the market manager about stall fees for low-income vendors. Her logic was water, patient and relentless, wearing down the stone of bureaucracy. He'd been captivated, not by her beauty, though she had that, but by her architecture. Her mind was a well-ordered system built for justice. He'd offered her a free cutting board as a tribute to a fellow craftsman. She'd laughed, a clear, surprising sound. "My craft is messy, eh? I deal in broken agreements and hurt feelings." "So do I," he'd said, gesturing to the raw, rough planks beside his finished work. "I just get to sand mine down to something beautiful." Their first real date was a walk along the river. He told her he was a systems consultant, burned out on helping corporations optimize. It was a half-truth wrapped in a full stop. She told him about her work as a mediator, believing conflict wasn't a fire to be fought, but not to be patiently untied. "You see the pattern in the chaos," he'd observed. "I have to. Otherwise, it's just noise." She looked at him then, really looked. "You do that too, don't you? You see the underlying shape of things." He had nearly faltered. "I used to. Now I try to just see the thing itself." It was the closest he'd ever come to a confession. She'd taken his hand, her touch a solid, warm reality. "The thing itself is good, Silas." Now, in the garage, she ran a finger along the seamless join of his new dovetail. "It's perfect, strong enough to hold the world. Just needs to hold a jewelry box," he said, forcing a smile. "Liar." She didn't smile back. "You found something last night." I could hear the quiet. It was a different kind of quiet. He set his chisel down. The ghost and the man warred for a second. The man won, but the ghost provided the words. "Marlowe Properties is a front. It's owned by a larger group, a predatory one, the kind that doesn't get into fights. It makes problems vanish into paperwork." Her eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in that fierce, analytical way he loved. "Can we use that? Expose them." The exposure would be a grenade. It could blow back on Joseph, on everyone in the building. He chose each word like placing a mine. But every system has a flaw, a single point of failure. If you apply the right pressure, it concedes. Cleanly, she studied him, and he felt more seen than he had in years. "This way of seeing patterns, is this what burned you out?" He met her gaze. "Yes. And applying this pressure, it would cost you? It might wake up some old clients. They believed in my retirement." The unspoken truth hung between them. She stepped closer, the scent of her coffee and her lavender soap cutting through the pine dust. "Silas, who were you?" He didn't flinch. "A man who built traps for giants." And then walked away because he realized he was just making better giants. She absorbed this, her mediator's mind parsing the metaphor for the concrete horror beneath. She didn't ask for details. She asked the only question that mattered to her now. "Can you do this? For Joseph, without becoming a giant again." "I can apply a tourniquet," he said quietly. "One precise cut to stop the bleeding. That's all." She nodded slowly, a pact sealed not with a handshake, but with shared, grim understanding. "What do you need from me?" "Normalcy. Your lawsuit continues. Be visible, be frustrated, be perfectly predictable. You are the distraction, the honest face of opposition they think they understand." A faint, grim smile touched her lips. "So, On the front operation, the ghost of a smile touched his. The most legitimate one imaginable. He spent the day in plain sight. He delivered the finished jewelry box to Mrs. Henderson next door. He helped Joseph fix a sticking drawer in his ancient roll-top desk, their hands working in companionable silence in the old man's sun-dappled, book-lined apartment, the sanctuary in the crosshairs. "They're trying to scare me out, Silas," Joseph said, not looking up from the drawer slide he was sanding. "The paperwork, the legalese, it's a weapon for people who think words are stronger than hands." "Words are just tools, Joseph," Silas replied, testing the drawer's smooth glide. "It's the intent behind them. And some tools can be turned around." That night, the ghost went to work. The operation was not in a dark garage, but in the pristine, virtual vaults of financial regulators. Using a series of anonymized relays and a digital identity he'd buried years ago, a ghost in the machine, he prepared a package. It was not an explosive leak. It was a surgical seed. He forged no documents. He simply connected dots that were designed to never be connected. The flow of capital from a Carthage-controlled fund in the Caymans, to Midas Holdings, to Marlowe Properties, to the specific city official who had fast-tracked the permits. He tied it to a recent, quiet SEC ruling about shell company transparency. He made it look like the work of a sharp, anonymous junior analyst at the regulatory agency itself, someone who'd stumbled upon a discrepancy and was kicking it upstairs. He uploaded the packet. It would surface in 3 days in a routine audit queue, a small, bureaucratic anomaly. But for Carthage, it would be a flare in the night. They would see the signature in the discovery, the way the threads were pulled, the specific pressure points highlighted. It was a message in a bottle, written in a language only one kind of architect would use. He sent it into the void and shut down his machine. 3 days later, he was buying groceries when his burner phone vibrated, a cheap, pay-as-you-go thing he'd bought for ordering with supplies online. A single, encrypted text from an unknown number. "The Fusilier returns. Was retirement not to your taste?" The message wasn't from a thug. It was from a peer. The chill was instantaneous. They'd seen it, and they'd recognized his hand. He deleted the message and destroyed the SIM card in the store's parking lot, his heart a cold, steady drum. The tourniquet was applied. Now, he had to see if the giant would feel the pinch or if it would simply look down and crush him. He walked back into his house, the bag of groceries a shield of normalcy. Lena was at the table, her laptop open, a look of stunned confusion on her face. "Silas," she said, her voice hushed. "Marlowe's lawyers just requested an indefinite pause in proceedings. They cited unforeseen internal review." "What did you do?" He set the groceries on the counter, the ghost receding, the man returning, weary to his bones. "I applied pressure to the flaw." He walked to the window. The street was quiet. The sparrow was back at the feeder. But Silas saw the landscape differently now. The lines of power, invisible to everyone else, shimmered like heat haze. He had drawn one, and from the distant glass and steel heart of Carthage, someone had just drawn a line back. Escape your past? You can't. Silas is haunted not by the people he killed, but by the one good man he expertly, perfectly destroyed. Unlock the memory that broke him. Only on Novella Station. Chapter 3. The Memory of Avalanches. The pause in the legal proceedings was a week of fragile, watchful peace. Joseph's gratitude was a palpable, warm thing. Lena's eyes held a new, complex alloy of relief and wariness. Silas felt stretched between them. The husband, the neighbor, and the ghost who had just whistled in the dark. It was Joseph who unexpectedly cracked the door to the past open. He'd come over to Silas's workshop, bearing 2 bottles of dark, homebrewed beer. "For the drawer," he said, placing them on the bench with a ceremonial thud. "And for whatever you did." They sat in worn lawn chairs by the garage door, watching the twilight bleed into evening. Joseph took a long pull from his bottle. "You know, when you first moved in, I thought you were running from something." Silas's grip on his own bottle tightened imperceptibly. "Yeah, not in a bad way. Not like a criminal. More like a man who'd seen the blueprint of something terrible and decided he wanted no part in building it." Joseph's old eyes, sharp as his chisels, looked out at the darkening street. I was in logistics, army, then private sector. Saw my share of systems, good, bad, efficient, cruel. You have the look of a man who understood the machinery a little too well. The ghost stirred, uneasy with this accuracy. It was just consulting, Joseph. High stakes, ethically gray. I help corporations win. Joseph nodded slowly. Winning's a funny thing. In my line, winning meant the package got there on time, intact, no matter what. Sometimes, no matter what meant cutting corners, ignoring local troubles, bribing an official. The system was efficient. It was also a bit soulless. He turned to Silas. You ever have to deliver a package that you knew was going to break something? Not the package itself, but the fact of its arrival. The question was a lance, striking the core of the memory Silas had walled off. He saw not Joseph, but the polished conference room of a mining conglomerate 6 years ago. The target had been a small, environmentally progressive nation sitting on rare earth minerals. The client wanted the government's protective regulations re-evaluated. A Fusilier's job. Silas hadn't fired a shot. He hadn't needed to. He'd identified the pressure point. The nation's beloved, charismatic minister of the interior, a man of genuine principle. Using a blend of deep digital forensics and old-fashioned human observation, Silas found the flaw. Not corruption, but a beloved, secretly ill sister whose treatment required a specialized clinic abroad. The package Silas delivered was not a threat, but a solution. An anonymous, untraceable fund to cover all medical costs for life, deposited into an offshore account only the minister could access. The unspoken pressure was exquisite, unbearable. A week later, the minister, citing shifting global realities, championed a surprise overhaul of the mining codes. The regulations collapsed. The conglomerate moved in. Silas had one. The system he'd tweaked had performed with beautiful, silent efficiency. He'd gotten his bonus, delivered in a discreet wire transfer. Then, 3 months later, came the news reports. The first protests at the new mine site. The heavy-handed private security response. Photos of muddy water in villages downstream. A picture of a local activist, a woman who had led the opposition, her face etched with a despair that seemed to stare directly at him through the pixels. His package, his perfectly delivered, surgically placed solution, hadn't just broken regulations. It had broken a man's integrity, and in doing so, had broken a community's back. He had not pulled a trigger. He had carefully, expertly removed a single keystone and watched the entire arch of people's lives crumble. The avalanche was controlled, predicted, and entirely his creation. That was the deed that broke the Fusilier. He'd walked into his Carthage controller's office the next day. The man, a sleek viper named Voss, though he wasn't the top then, had smiled. A masterpiece, Silas. Clean, deniable, poetic even. I'm done, Silas had said, his voice hollow. Voss's smile hadn't faltered. Done? You're at the peak of your craft. The red file on the Kazakh energy grid is next. It's your magnum opus. I said I'm done. The silence that followed was colder than any threat. Retirement from Carthage wasn't a resignation. It was a severance. The terms were their own form of Fusilier craftsmanship. 1 week of no rules, where any Carthage asset worldwide could settle any grievance with him. No questions asked. It was meant to be a death sentence. He'd survived it by becoming not a target, but a void, vanishing into the identities he'd built for operations, using their own protocols against them. He'd left a trail of blood, yes, but mostly he'd left confusion and systemic failures in their own tracking. He emerged on the other side, not triumphant, but scoured clean. A ghost. Joseph was still looking at him, waiting. Yeah, Silas said, the word rough. I delivered that package. Once. It was the last one. Joseph didn't press. He just clinked his bottle gently against Silas's. To not delivering the next one. But the next one had already been delivered. The regulatory leak was a package, small and precise, sent to Carthage. And they had received it. The response came not with violence, but with a symphony of systemic precision. 2 days later, Lena's Mediation Center lost its major funding grant. The philanthropic foundation cited shifting priorities. The paperwork was impeccable. Silas's premier lumber supplier, a family business he'd worked with for years, emailed him with profound apologies. A larger conglomerate had bought them out. His exclusive orders of figured Claro walnut and quartersawn white oak were regretfully no longer tenable under new distribution agreements. Then, the notice from the city. A complaint had been filed about commercial-level woodworking noise and dust emissions from a residential property. An inspection was scheduled. The complaint was anonymous. The city code cited was obscure but valid. Standing in his suddenly, terrifyingly quiet workshop, Silas felt a grim admiration. This was not the clumsy threat of a Moreau. This was a Fusilier's work. His work. It was a demonstration. I see your life. I see its pressure points. I can dismantle it, piece by legal piece, and leave you standing in a ruin of paperwork. That evening, over a tense dinner, Lena pushed her food around her plate. The Foundation won't return my calls. It's like we never existed. And the city inspector is coming next Tuesday. This isn't coincidence, Silas. No, he agreed, his voice flat. It's a conversation. A conversation? It's economic strangulation. It's the opening move. He met her eyes. They're showing me they can map our lives just as I can map theirs. They're asking a question. What question? Whether I'm worth more to them inside their system or as a pile of ashes outside of it. The doorbell rang, a jarringly normal sound. They froze. Silas moved to the front window, saw a sleek, unmarked courier van pulling away. On the doorstep lay a single, thick cardboard envelope. No return address. He brought it inside, laid it on the table. Using a knife from the block, a common kitchen knife, not a tool of his trade, he slid it open. Inside was not a threat. It was a job offer. A crisp, confidential prospectus from Midas Holdings detailing a proposed acquisition of a small, innovative renewable energy firm in Denmark. The firm's founder was a stubborn idealist, holding out against the buyout. Attached was a thin, separate memo. It contained no letterhead, only 3 lines of text. The Danish problem presents fascinating structural redundancies. A Fusilier's perspective would be invaluable. Redeem your recent exuberance. Full reinstatement. Consider the alternatives. It was signed with a single, typed initial, V. Roland Voss. He'd risen, and he remembered. Lena read the memo over his shoulder. Her face went pale. They want you to go back. They want me to break a man who believes in clean energy, so they can gut his company for parts. A Danish Joseph. The ghost in him was awake, scanning the prospectus, already seeing the leverage points, the founder's likely vulnerabilities, family, debt, passion. You can't. If I don't, they keep cutting. The inspection next week will find a violation. The fine will be crippling. They'll go after your professional certification next. Or they'll buy Joseph's building outright and evict him next month. He spoke calmly, outlining the cascade. They won't stop. This is the system. It escalates until the will to resist is mathematically eliminated. So we fight. Lena's voice was fierce, but trembled. We are. But we can't fight their system from outside with a picket sign. We have to fight it from within their logic. He looked at the offer, his mind, the Fusilier's mind, already whirring. A terrible, dark idea began to form, not of compliance, but of subversion. They sent me a package to deliver. Maybe I deliver it to the wrong address. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the dawning, horrified understanding. The man she loved was proposing to walk back into the labyrinth, not to get lost, but to remap it from the inside. You would have to become him again, she whispered. The Fusilier. The Fusilier got me out once, he said, and he built this. He gestured to the house, to her, to the life they'd made. He's a part of the joint. I can't cut him out without weakening the whole thing. I have to use him. He picked up the kitchen knife, still on the table from opening the envelope. It was a simple tool for cutting vegetables for slicing bread. He looked at it, then at the elegant, destructive proposal for Voss. 2 tools, 2 purposes. He placed the knife back in its block. I'm going to Denmark, he said. To save a dream in Denmark, Silas must become his old self. But the mission is a trap, and the target is a mirror of everything he's trying to protect. The gambit unfolds, only on Novella Station. Chapter 4. The Copenhagen Gambit. Copenhagen was a city of clean lines and soft, maritime light, a a world away from the contained chaos of his own neighborhood. Silas felt the ghost of his old self settling over him like a well-tailored, invisible suit. He was no longer Silas the carpenter, but Silas Niels, a freelance strategic compliance consultant from Toronto. The identity was one of several Carthage had built for him in the old days, left dormant, not burned. Using it was a risk, a direct tap on the shoulder to Voss, saying I'm using your tools. But that was the point. The target was Soren Vestergaard, founder of Ager Dynamics. The company's specialty was modular tidal energy converters, elegant, scalable machines that harnessed the sea's pulse. Soren was a true believer, a man who saw engineering as a moral act. Carthage, through Midas, wanted Ager not for its tech, but for its patents and its talented, underpaid engineers. Their plan was to strip it, shelve the unprofitable tidal projects, and pivot the team to more lucrative, defense-adjacent drone propulsion. Silas's cover briefing was chilling in its detail. It included Soren's weekly schedule, his favorite cafe in Nyhavn, the name of his ailing Labrador, his daughter's ballet school. The pressure points were already circled. Soren's passion, his paternal love for his team, his quiet, private fear of failure. The dossier was a masterpiece of reduction, turning a man into a series of levers to be pulled. He spent his first 2 days in passive observation, a phantom in a wool coat. He watched Soren at the cafe, arguing with an engineer over a schematic, his hands animated, his face alight with conviction. He saw him later, walking the old dog along the canal, his shoulders slumped with a fatigue that wasn't physical. Here was the flaw, not in his character, but in his situation. The man was stretched thin, trying to save the world while fighting a corporate hydra, a loving father running out of runway. On the 3rd day, Silas engineered a meeting. He didn't fake a chance encounter. He used a more direct, Fusilier-approved method. He became a solution to a problem. He called Soren's office from a blocked number, using the confident, unflappable tone of a man who moved in boardrooms. Mr. Vestergaard, my name is Niels. I represent a private consortium interested in sustainable infrastructure. We've been quietly impressed with Ager's work on the Limfjord project. We understand you're in exclusive talks with Midas. We'd like to present a counter-offer before you sign anything. It was a lie with a core of truth. The consortium was a fiction, but the admiration for the Limfjord project was real, gleaned from deep within the company's own servers. Soren, skeptical but desperate for any alternative to Midas, agreed to a discreet dinner. They met at a tucked-away restaurant in Christianshavn. Soren arrived, looking every bit the principled, weary warrior. Up close, Silas could see the intelligence in his eyes and the shadow of a trapped animal. Your interest is timely, Mr. Niels, Soren said, after the wine was poured. The Midas offer is sufficient, but their long-term vision for Ager is not aligned with ours. Sufficient meaning it saves your investors, but kills your dream, Silas stated, not asked. Soren flinched, then nodded. You are blunt. I deal in structures, Soren. May I? The structure you're in is a vice. Midas on one side, insolvency on the other. You are the pivot point. They know this. They are applying pressure not to your company's balance sheet, but to you, to your fear for your team's jobs, to your love for your family's stability. He spoke calmly, dissecting the very attack he was supposedly there to counter. Son Pete, how could you possibly know that? Because it's what I would do. Silas let the silence hang, watching the man process the chilling admission. I am not with a consortium, Soren. I am a problem solver, and I've been hired by the same people who are pressuring you. The engineer's face hardened into betrayal and fury. He began to rise. Wait, Silas said, his voice low but compelling. I was hired to find your flaw and exploit it. I have. It's your integrity. It's a magnificent, terrible flaw. It makes you predictable, and it makes you vulnerable. He leaned forward. But what if that flaw could also be your armor? Soren sank back down, confused, intrigued despite himself. What are you talking about? Midas expects a Fusilier. That's what I am, to deliver a package that breaks you. They want me to hand them a lever, and they will pull it. So I will. I will give them a lever, but you'll be the one who controls where it moves. He laid out his gambit. It was an act of theatrical, systemic jujitsu. Silas would provide Voss with a report detailing Soren's vulnerability, his deep emotional commitment to his lead engineer, a brilliant young woman named Freja, who was also his goddaughter. The report would suggest that a threat to her career, a fabricated plagiarism charge, perhaps, would break Soren's will and force the sale. But here's what we do, Silas said. You will go to Freja. You will tell her everything. You will have her preemptively submit all her research to an independent academic registry tomorrow, creating a public, time-stamped record of her work. You will then, the day after I submit my report, hold a press conference. Not to decry Midas, but to proudly announce Ager's new open innovation partnership. You will release a key, non-core patent into the public domain in her name to spur the green energy sector. Soren's eyes widened. That patent is worth millions. It is worth less than your company's soul, and it turns their weapon into your shield. When Midas moves to activate the pressure point on Freja, they will find it is not a point of failure, but a public relations landmine. They will look predatory and foolish. More importantly, it will signal to them that their intelligence is compromised, that their Fusilier has either failed or turned. Silas took a sip of water. It will make you indigestible to them. They will withdraw. They hate public mess almost as much as they love private profit. And you? Soren asked, his voice hushed. They will know you betrayed them. That, Silas said, a cold certainty in his gut, is between me and them. My goal is to make you an unattractive target, to make your integrity a structural deterrent, not a weakness. He saw the calculations flash behind Soren's eyes. The risk, the radical trust required, the potential salvation. Why? Soren finally breathed. Why would you do this? You are one of them. Silas thought of Joseph's drawer, gliding smoothly on its repaired runners. He thought of Lena's face when she talked about the community garden. He thought of the avalanche in that distant green country. Because I delivered a package once that broke a good man. It allowed a different kind of pollution. I have to believe some packages can be delivered to build a levee instead. The plan was set in motion with the quiet precision of a Swiss watch. Silas filed his confidential report to Voss, a masterpiece of malicious clarity. Soren and Freja executed their countermaneuver with equal precision. The press conference was small but effective, covered by the niche tech and environmental outlets. Silas waited in his hotel room. The ghost fully ascended, monitoring the digital ether for the ripple. It came not as a wave, but as a perfect, silent correction. The Midas offer for Agar Dynamics was formally withdrawn the next day, citing shifting strategic priorities. It was clean, bloodless, and total. His burner phone buzzed with a single, new message. Clever, sentimental, and ultimately transparent. The Fusilier seeks to atone. Atonement is a variable we did not factor. It makes you unreliable. Before he could process it, a second message followed, this one containing a file. He opened it. It was a high-resolution photograph, taken from a long lens. It showed Lena, leaving the grocery store, a reusable bag in her hand. The timestamp was from that morning. The photo was annotated with a single, yellow arrow, pointing not at her, but at the storefront behind her. A zoomed-in inset showed the building's owner listed on a public registry, a shell company that traced back, through 3 layers, to a Carthage-controlled venture fund. The final line of text appeared. Your life is a system we built, Silas. You cannot repurpose the foundation. Come home. We will discuss your re-education. The chill that went through him was absolute. They weren't threatening her directly. They were demonstrating ownership of his street, his shops, the very infrastructure of his sanctuary. Voss wasn't angry. He was correcting. He was recalling a faulty, sentimental tool to the workshop. Silas deleted the messages and smashed the phone. He looked out at the Copenhagen spire, its green copper sharp against the gray sky. He had won the battle in Denmark. He had saved Soren's dream. And in doing so, he had proven to Carthage that he was not just a retired asset, but a rogue variable. And rogue variables were not fought. They were deleted. He packed his bag. He wasn't flying home to peace. He was flying home to war, a war where the battlefield was the deed to his own life. They're not sending thugs. They're sending bills, audits, and cancellations. See how an empire dismantles a life, one legal piece at a time. The systemic war escalates. Only on Novella Station. Chapter 5. The Architecture of Home. The flight home was a 9-hour limbo of taut silence. Silas didn't see clouds, he saw networks. The photograph wasn't a threat of violence. It was a blueprint of possession. Carthage didn't just own his past. They had quietly, legally purchased the lattice of his present. The grocery store, the bank that held his mortgage, the utility provider, the local hardware store. How many were soft assets in a Midas portfolio? His sanctuary was a company town, and he hadn't even known he was a tenant. He landed not with a plan, but with a chilling realization. He could not win by defending the perimeter. The perimeter was theirs. He had to attack the deed. Lena was waiting for him at the arrival's curb. The relief in her eyes when she saw him was sharp enough to cut. He hugged her, feeling the tension in her shoulders, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, a familiar anchor in a suddenly alien world. "How was Copenhagen?" she asked as they pulled away, her voice carefully neutral. "Cold. Effective. The Danish problem is resolved." He watched the city he called home stream past the window. He now saw it as a hostile architecture. That pharmacy. Carthage-linked distributor? That coffee shop. Commercial lease held by a Midas subsidiary? Joseph left a bottle on the porch, Lena said, and the city inspector came. Silas's head snapped toward her, and he was oddly courteous. Poked around the garage, said the dust collection system was admirably efficient, and left. No citation. She glanced at him. It felt like a stay of execution, not an acquittal. It was Voss pausing the dismantling to see if the prodigal tool would realign. "Come home. We will discuss your re-education." He didn't tell her about the photograph that night. He stored it away in the vault of horrors he kept from her. Instead, after a silent dinner, he went to his workshop. Not to the ghost's laptop, but to the physical wood. He needed to think with his hands. He selected a block of ash, dense and stubborn. He began to shape it with a draw knife, not into anything specific, but following the grain, feeling for its resistance. His past deeds, the ones that built the ghost, floated unbidden. The Kazakh energy grid, that had been the magnum opus Voss mentioned. It wasn't about blowing up power plants. It was about identifying the one human dispatcher in the vast, computerized system who was brilliant, underpaid, and nursing a bitter, secret grievance against his corrupt superiors. Silas's package, then, was a fabricated, anonymous dossier proving that grievance, along with a simple, untraceable communication. You have the power to remind them of your value. A 15-minute, targeted blackout in the ministry district during the big summit would be poetic. He'd provided the technical vulnerabilities to make it possible. The man had done it. The cascading failures had cost the regime billions and cemented a rival's power. A rival who had a sweetheart deal with a Carthage shell company. Silas had turned a man's righteous anger into a geopolitical weapon, and all the man got was a brief, terrifying sense of agency before he was inevitably caught and disappeared. The ghost had seen it as elegant. The man, now stroking the ash, felt the vomit rise at the memory of that elegance. His hands worked faster, shaving off long, curling ribbons of wood. Each ribbon felt like a layer of the persona he'd shed. The Sao Paulo water rights. That was another. A Fusilier solution to a client blocked by a grassroots coalition. He hadn't attacked the coalition. He'd found the single, overburdened, idealistic lawyer who tied them all together. His package was a beautifully forged set of documents suggesting the coalition's beloved founder had secretly taken corporate money years earlier. He leaked it to the lawyer from a fake activist account. The lawyer, heartbroken and furious, confronted the founder publicly. The coalition tore itself apart in a storm of acrimony and distrust. The water rights were approved a month later. Silas had weaponized love and trust, turning them into shrapnel. The efficiency of it still haunted him. It was this deed, more than any other, that made him understand he wasn't a strategist. He was a poisoner of wells. He set the draw knife down, his hands trembling slightly. The ash block was now a rough, abstract shape, full of potential, but also of the scars of the tools that had worked it. He was that block. Carthage had shaped him. His retirement was an attempt to reshape himself. But the original grain, the original weaknesses they had exploited, were still there. The answer came to him then, not as a flash, but as a slow, cold settling. He could not cut out the grain. He could not pretend the scars weren't there. He had to use the very shape they had given him. Voss wanted to re-educate him, to remind him of his purpose. Silas would show him a new purpose. He went to the hidden laptop. This time, he didn't dig into Carthage. He dug into himself. He accessed the deepest, most encrypted caches, not of his targets, but of his own old work. The red files, the unsanctioned personal archives every Fusilier kept as insurance. He had logs, methodologies, proof of protocols. The skeletons in Carthage's closet were ones he had helped dress. He began to compile a new package. But this one wasn't designed to collapse a single target. It was a virus. He wove together strands from a dozen different operations. The Kazakh dispatcher's identity, the Sao Paulo forgeries, the mining minister's sister, the financial pathways from the Danish dossier. He created a narrative not of Carthage's strength, but of its foundational weakness, its reliance on the humanity of its targets. He highlighted the patterns that a truly systemic opponent, a national intelligence agency, a tenacious international prosecutor, could follow. He then wrote a letter, not to a regulator, to Roland Voss. It was brief and written in their shared, clinical language. Voss, you mistake sentiment for weakness. You see a flaw in your tool. The flaw is the tool. I have mapped the pressure points of the hand that holds me. The attached package is a dead man's switch. Its release is triggered by any further action against my life structure, by any re-education attempt, or by my death. It does not target Carthage's operations. It targets Carthage's methodology. It gives every future target a blueprint for resistance. You build a system that preys on human frailty. I am now a system that preys on that predation. Stand down. The Fusilier is no longer for hire. He is now a permanent, structural countermeasure. He encrypted it all, tying the release trigger to his biometrics, a heartbeat monitor he would now wear, his daily digital signature, and the final grim safeguard, a delay trigger upon any arrest or hospitalization of Lena or Joseph. He sent it. The response was not immediate. For 24 hours, the silence was a physical weight. Lena felt it. Something's coming, isn't it? She asked over breakfast. It's already here, he said. We're in the eye. It broke at 3:17 p.m. His phone rang. A local number, but one he didn't know. He answered. Silas. The craftsmanship is appreciated. It was Voss's voice, smooth, devoid of anger. He sounded like a professor reviewing a promising, if misguided, thesis, turning our own artistry against us. A recursive trap. It's intellectually satisfying. Silas said nothing. Your error, Voss continued, is in believing you have moved outside the system. You haven't. You have merely created a new subsystem within it, a parasitic one. We tolerate parasites that serve a purpose. Yours may yet serve to remind others of the cost of sentiment. Is that a stand down? Silas's voice was gravel. It is an acknowledgement of a stalemate. For now, the line clicked and went dead. A moment later, Lena's phone chirped. She looked at it, her brow furrowed. The foundation, they've reinstated the grant. Apology for administrative error. Silas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It wasn't victory. It was a ceasefire signed on a trembling line. That evening, he walked to Joseph's. The old man was in his garden, tending to his roses. Storm pass. Joseph asked without looking up. For now, Silas said. They've reassessed. Joseph nodded, snipping a dead head. Good. You know, when you build something to last, you don't just think about the joinery. You think about the wood. You have to let it move. It swells, it shrinks. If you constrain it too rigidly, it cracks. He finally looked at Silas. You've been trying not to move, to stay completely still. Maybe it's time to learn how to move with the grain again. Silas returned to his workshop. He looked at the misshapen block of ash. He picked up a carving gouge, not to fight the grain, but to follow it. He began to hollow it out, creating a vessel. It would never be a perfect box. It would be warped, unique, bearing the marks of its own history and the tools that shaped it. But could hold something. He worked late into the night. Not as the ghost, not as the peaceful man, but as something new. The craftsman who knew the nature of both the tool and the timber. The war wasn't over, but he had finally drawn a line on a map they both understood. He was no longer a hidden fugitive. He was a sovereign state, with defined borders and a terrifying deterrent. And he would spend every day of the peace that followed learning what to build within them. The greatest betrayal isn't from an enemy. Discover the chilling moment Silas realizes the kindly old man next door is the mastermind, and his family was the perfect bait. The plot twists, only on Novella Station. You've just reached the turning point. The line between friend and strategist has been erased. Was the most dangerous part Silas's brutal skills? Or was it the discovery that his entire new life, his marriage, his peace, his war, was a move on someone else's board? The Joiner is just getting started. Part 2 plunges Silas into a conflict where the enemy isn't a syndicate. It's the architecture of his own reality. We need to know, what shocked you more? The red week of his past, or the red thread Joseph pulled in his present? Comment bilo? Tell us what you think happens next. Does Silas confront Joseph? Or does he play the longer, more dangerous game? Like to demand Part 2. Subscribe to Novella Station so you don't miss the next move in this psychological war. Share this with a friend who loves a story where the most terrifying weapon is a truth discovered too late. The board is set. The real players are just showing themselves.